Hello, YouTubers. In this video, I'm going to be showing a massive stack of books that I have arranged next to my computer right now. Basically, I already know what I'm going to read next as my next audio vlog. It's something that I decided to read a long time ago. So, I mean, before I recorded my Adorno series, or as I was recording it, you all know this book, Aesthetic Theory. You don't, I have an entire video series of me reading this book cover to cover. But I already know what book I'm going to read next. It's a deep cut. It's not going to be of interest to most people, and most people won't know what it is. It's called Theory of the Avant-Garde. I'd show it to you, but it's at the bottom of this massive stack, so we'll get to it. Basically, in this video, I want to tell people who are watching that I have a quite respectable library. I also have a pretty decent microphone and a video camera that records in 1080p. So what I would like to do is start recording more audiobooks that in like a much better quality than my last video series, and in better quality than the series that is incoming. Basically, right now I only really have the capacity to just fucking record like these live video streams, but I do have the means to record much better series that I could in fact release and distribute as like straight up audiobooks, as like downloadable audio files rather than strictly as these video files. But what is preventing me from doing that is a lack of motivation. Like, I don't really have any experience editing video, just simply like splicing together an audio file and a video file. Obviously, it's a very simple thing to do, and I could learn it in like an hour or two, I'm sure. But I haven't really like done that yet. And this video is a shill for my Patreon. I'm sure I'll put a link to it somewhere. I don't even remember what the URL is, but basically I'm asking you to support me on Patreon so that I can get off my ass and like provide some decent content. Because like, as the, you know, civilization that we live in is a testament to, there's no greater motive than the profit motive. Anyway, I'm just going to show you this book that I got recently. It's Karl Marx Dispatches for the New York Tribune, Selected Journalism of Karl Marx, Penguin editions. Got a bunch of, you know what it is, got a bunch of Karl Marx like wrote for the New York Herald Tribune back in the day and basically came up as a journalist. So it's got a lot of journalism here. And like, I've been trying to write more reportage, more journalism style things. And when as I'm writing it, I always ask myself, what would Marx write? Of course, Marx is just one part of the equation. You also got to ask yourself, what would Lenin write? And another book that I bought recently, Black Marxism by Cedric J. Robinson, The Making of the Black Radical Tradition. Very daunting book, quite massive, quite full of text. Book that I'm really looking forward to reading. I don't really know much about it. I don't know. I think it's like a lot of history more so than like straight up theory, but which makes it like more engaging reading. But really looking forward to reading this. And this actually, I might break with my my theme of like doing. Holy fuck! There's a lot of footnotes here, but I might break with the theme that I want to establish of like doing aesthetics, because you know there's a lot of shit going on in the world right now, and gotta like read some fucking black radical shit, dude. And then also here I have this book, Fan Shen by William Hinton, which is a documentary of revolution in a Chinese village. It's William Hinton. He's like a American academic, I think, who like went to China and like spent years in this village as they're going through the Cultural Revolution and just like documenting the revolution there. He's very sympathetic to everything that was happening, but also gives like a good like outside perspective on it. So this is a book that I think is like very important for Maoist historiography, and haven't read this yet. Really looking forward to reading it again. Another like historical work rather than theory or philosophy. Very fucking massive tome here that I'm quite looking forward to reading, and I could read to you if you support me at any level on Patreon. And if you support me on Patreon, just send me a message and tell me what book I should read next. This is Adorno, The Stars Down to Earth. Bought this at a local bookshop in my neighborhood. Had it in the window when I got it. It's basically like a very long, it's like a collection of some essays by Adorno. Adorno, a famous essayist, but the main one is this quite long essay called The Stars Down to Earth, which is like a critique of like an astrology column that was running in a major American newspaper. I'm pretty sympathetic to astrology in a way, in an idiosyncratic way, in a kind of metaphysical way. So I'm quite interested to see how Adorno is criticizing astrology. I think it's more just from like a cultural perspective, less so than a fucking metaphysical perspective. Adorno is not quite a metaphysician. And next up, we have this book here, Karl Marx, The Grundrisse. This another daunting text. I'm really looking forward to reading this. I've read only volume 1, but this is supposed to kind of be like it was unpublished in his lifetime. It's like taken from a bunch of notebooks that he wrote over like a pretty short period of time, given the length of the text. But it's supposed to be like an overview of the entire project that he had imagined for Capital in all its volumes. Like obviously Capital Volume 1 is the only volume of that project that he published in his lifetime, but it was supposed to be like a quite extensive project, and the Grundrisse is like a kind of it's like more methodological overview of it, more philosophical, I think. Now here we have a book that I don't really know anything about. I bought it because Todorov is the Bulgarian spelling of my own last name, Todorov. Zvetvan Todorov is like so I've just looked him up a little bit. He's like a literary theorist kind of guy. This is in the same book series as the book that I'm going to be reading next, Theory of the Avant-Garde. It's also the same book series as this Adorno book, published by the University of Minnesota Press. This is Theory and History of Literature, Volume 1. This is Theory and History of Literature, Volume 88. And the other one, well, we'll get to it. And wow, look at this fucking huge ass book here. This is Reading Capital, the complete edition. I also have the abridged edition, which is like truly puny compared to this. I mean, the spacing and the text are pretty large in this. There's a lot of like diagrams and stuff. Interesting. But yeah, authors are a famous problematic Marxist philosopher, Western Marxist philosopher. I have this other book from him out from the library, which means that it's basically mine indefinitely. I took it out from the library before the pandemic, but what is it called? It's called like Philosophy of the Event or something. It's got like a pretty cool essay on like the ancient metaphysical materialism and how it relates to contemporary like Marxist materialism. It's like kind of poetic, but also I mean the poetic aspect of it is not something that I enjoyed as much as like the straight up like exegesis of Epicurus and all that. So this is a classic art historical like textbook. It teaches you all about reading artworks and how to look at artworks and the difference between iconography and symbolism and like how to and different types of iconography and just basically like principles of art history, classic text of the art historical scientific canon. And here we have Richard Wollheim, Art and Its Objects, another book that I just picked up at a bookstore, used bookstore, because I had heard of it in the context of an art history class that I was taking. It's like another kind of like a canonical textbook of the discipline that I'm going to read just to like get a more comprehensive grounding and fundamentals of that fucking shit. So next I'm going to, I mean, you guys love this shit. I'm not crazy about it, but we have here 1,000 Plateaus, and then we have Anti-Oedipus, and we also have volume 2 of Cinema. I have volume 1, but my books, I moved recently, my books I've not unpacked them and couldn't locate volume 1, but I have it. All in the newer University of Minnesota editions. Very nice. I mean, people love this shit. You want me to fucking read 1,000 Plateaus and Anti-Oedipus? Just give me some money and I'll do it. I'll record an audiobook and you can listen to it while you're, shipping copies of these from the Amazon warehouse. And here we have another like historical book of the text in this is quite small. I think I got it. I forget why I got this. I feel like Mao Zedong thought. Interesting. Want to know about Maoism? I do. But this is like a historical text of the new communist movement in the United States. Cool guys right there. Yeah, like more history. You could read that too. All right, you want to learn more about American communism? Just support me on Patreon. This is another Deleuze book. This is actually a book that I've read quite extensively. I read this for a class, studied it quite a bit. It's amazing. I would actually love to read this again, and they've like written essays about it, so I feel like I have like a fair amount of stuff to say about it. And there's a lot to say about this book. It's incredible. I'm not like the biggest Deleuze fan, but that book is very beautiful. Very, very like interesting exposition of Nietzsche. And this new Endnotes Volume 5 got this after supporting like contributing to their Kickstarter and like pre-ordering this back in like December of 2019. Ordered several other volumes of Endnotes at the same time. I think 3, 2, 3, and 4. I didn't get all of them, but they ended up sending me like 2 sets of my order by accident. So what I could do is just to incentivize this supporting me on Patreon. The first person to support me on Patreon gets a copy of Endnotes Volume 5. How about that? I guess you can hold me to that. And here's Volume 4. And I have 2 copies of it. I don't need them, so. And that's a fucking bonus. That's like a deal. That book costs a lot more than my $5 minimum tier. Man, I'm really gonna have to like edit my Patreon after. I think the last time that I like spent time working on the copy of my Patreon page was like months ago, and it just doesn't make any sense. But this is a cool book. I've read like half of it, I think, for a kind of like reading group that was at my school here in Montreal. Politics of Relation, another book by like a Black philosopher that I could read to. It's relevant. I mean, I feel like I should be studying more Black condition given the situation right now. This is actually what I'm going to be reading next. It's certainly not Black, extremely white. Sorry about that. But yeah, this is a book. It's this Adorno book that I read. There's this scholar who has written like quite extensively. Like he wrote an entire book length treatment of aesthetic theory and has like written a bunch of articles. And I read one of them about like how this guy Berger and Adorno are kind of like antagonists in a way. I got this at the Strand bookstore in New York City. I was there just before the quarantine hit, and it really felt like as I was leaving, like I left like the day before they instituted like they closed all the restaurants here in Quebec, and it really felt like there was like a fucking like atom bomb explosion going off in the rearview mirror as we were driving away from New York City. Like the vibe was so weird towards the end, just like really like apocalyptic. But this is going to be quite an interesting text. I'll probably start it tomorrow, maybe tonight if I'm feeling up to it. But gonna be doing the same format of just reading for an hour a day, probably getting through about 15 pages. I'm going to title the videos better. I'm going to title them after the pages that I will be going through. But yeah, very interesting book. Well, yeah, so tune in tomorrow to find out what it is about. This is a book that I'm reading right now for a reading group that I'm a part of. It's called Art and Bare Life. It's not quite it's a really cool book. Really like cool is I think the best way to describe it. Like tons of references to all your cool, chic philosophers, Deleuze, Agamben, Foucault. It's like a biopolitics text, kind of about like how culture fits into the biopolitical regime, how it's kind of like the creative force behind biopolitics. Getting a lot out of it with the reading group. The reading group is actually a very good way to read books. And what we are doing is meeting every week, going through it just very slowly, about 20 pages a session, reading every week, and meeting on Zoom, usually for about like 2.5 hours, just like moving through the text in the order that we're reading it, just like discussing every aspect of it, making sure that we've all got it down. And I feel like I'm getting so much out of it because like I've been in like seminars in university before, but like, and those are really good because you have like a professor who has kind of like already done the labor of like mapping out the concepts of what you're reading. But I feel like an informal reading group in this style is more effective because you are moving through it at a more organic pace, at the actual pace of people's comprehension, at the pace of people's reading. Like we're not really setting like these kind of arbitrary benchmarks that you have in school where like you have like 13 weeks in a semester, so you have to divide the amount of pages by that, and then like even if you don't get around to discussing every single concept that you read, like you have to move on to the next section. This is another book that I got at the Strand. It's The Tunnel. It's a novel. It's huge. William Guest, like a philosophical writer. This is about like a philosophy professor who kind of like goes off the deep end and is writing about he's doing some kind of like history book about like Nazi Germany, and then starts writing an introduction to it and like just goes completely nuts or something. Starts digging a tunnel under his house. William Guest. I've never read any of his works before, but he's known as a master of the sentence. So a lot of work into his sentences. And the last in my little stack here that I just brought out to show off my book collection, it's about like 10% of the books that I have. This Terry Eagleton book which I got because it has an essay. Terry Eagleton is just such a good writer. I feel like these people coming from the tradition of like English literature and in like literary studies are just really, they have an advantage over philosophers and like straight up theorists, just because like they're coming out of reading literature, so I guess it rubs off on them and they just know how to write better. But there's a chapter in here about Adorno, and I wanted to read it. It's also a chapter about Kierkegaard, who's my main man, and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and Heidegger and Benjamin, and yeah, looking for. I could read that as some supplementary material. I know, like, a lot of the correspondence that I got over the Adorno reading is like kind of asking me to give some like commentary on the text, because like I had a hard time understanding it, and I think everybody else is having a hard time understanding it because it's like a generally difficult to understand work. I mean, I could do that, but like that is just such a tremendous amount of labor to like go through this book and like just like sentence by sentence, like the prospect of going through it and like trying to like understand it would just take like years. And like, what the hell do I know anyway? Yeah, but there's a lot of supplementary material on this that I could read as, little audiobooks if you support me on Patreon. Do I have anything else to say? Oh yeah, something else that we could do is because I have this reading group that I joined. Somebody else started it, and they are organized through Discord. It's like a chatting server application. So I've gotten a few pieces of feedback on my Adorno reading, which is very validating. It's very nice to get feedback from people, to know that people have actually benefited from it, that's people are watching it. I did it like just mostly for myself, but it's pretty gratifying to know that it's having an impact. And what we could do is set up a Discord and like try to get a reading group going. I could just like read and record the audiobook, and then we could meet over Zoom or whatever, and like have some actual discussions. We could like democratically decide what to read, etc. But yeah, I'm going to now end the video. I'll put a link to my Patreon. I think the lowest tier that I have is like $5. If I don't get around to adding my Patreon and it doesn't make any sense to you, please excuse that. Just know that what you'll be paying for is for me to figure out how to like get my microphone out of the box that it is in somewhere, and figure out how to edit videos and like upload them somewhere so I can actually, so it'll be much, much easier for you to listen to. But until next time.